Chapter 13 Camping Tales, Midge Dawn. Camping with Tashi was rarely a pleasurable experience, but his behaviour did improve over the years, and occasionally the experience would be something more than tolerable. We did have a wonderful trip to the silver sands of Mora, where we enjoyed some glorious sunsets over the island of Rum. And as the night fell, I lay flat on my back gazing up at the stars. Tashi loved romping along the beaches, exploring interesting olfactory sensations and mounds of seaweed to roll about in. We even managed to secure a fairly isolated pitch at the campsite, and this gave my boy less of a reason to bark dingo in the night. He even endured time confined in the tent with stoical resignation. For 2 days it was paradise on earth, and then the westerly breezes from the Atlantic vanished, and the midges came out to play. Only the wind can save us from Attila's ravenous hordes now. An uneasy end to hostilities is still holding, after the bloody battle to rid the tent of the first swarm wave. All around us, the midge horde is massing for a revenge attack. They are led by tactical genius Generalissimo Attila Midge, who has sworn to avenge the massacre that I alone have perpetrated against midgekind. I mowed up hundreds with tissue and index finger, and watched with sadistic relish as hundreds more perished in my flames of death, either from outright incineration or marginally more slowly in the wax lava pools. The first wave was only vanquished after several hours of bloody struggle, and now strict security measures are in place to ensure there are no further breaches in my defensive perimeter. But I fear Tashi is my Trojan horse. We will need to leave the squalid sanctuary of the tent soon. Tashi needs to lift his leg, and all 2 legs will need to pay a visit to the toilet block. Camping in Scotland is something I view with mixed emotions, but somehow I always manage to entertain the prospect of it with an air of optimism, and given my personal experience, this is difficult to understand. Midges and insects in general are something you expect to endure, but with a degree of discipline, the worst of it can be contained to bouts of minor unpleasantness. A comfortable night's sleep is not something I readily anticipate in a tent, and over a prolonged period, wild camping can easily become a test of endurance. Food is perhaps the only thing that improves with time where camping is concerned, and this is only because hunger precludes the discerning palate. That only leaves the unexpected, and by its very nature, there is little you can do about that. I have spent more time in a tent with Anna Anchak than any other human, or dog for that matter. We bought the Eureka Hobbit in Australia, and it had its first outing when we walked the overland track in Tasmania and climbed Mount Ossa. Trips to the Pyrenees and France followed, and I spent a month within its cramped confines in the Indian Himalaya. We dubbed it the Horrendous Hobbit as a term of endearment, and it served us well for over a decade, until it was stolen from a washing line in Glasgow. The Hobbit, as its name would suggest, was not a commodious tent, but it was easy to pitch, and light enough for wild camping expeditions to climb remote Munros. The midge can make camping intolerable in Scotland, and particularly during the summer months, when they swarm at dusk and dawn in biblical plague proportions of biting fury. But the daylight hours are long during the Scottish summer, and it can be difficult to resist the temptation of a wild camp and the prize of 2 remote Cairngorm Munros. And they do say the midges are fewer in the north-east of Scotland, and my wind-calling prayer has been known to work. Dusk after a long day on Cairntoul and Angel Peak finds us approaching the high point of the Larry Guru path back to Derry Lodge. I am knackered and a little grouchy as Anna is setting a furious pace, driven on by the imagined comforts of our small Eureka Hobbit tent and the shortening daylight hours of late August. The weather has been perfect, perhaps the best of the entire summer. Scotland always provides at least one such day each year, and maybe we've just had it. The Cairngorms can be a grim and forbidding place in bad weather, but when you get a good day and a great mountain walk, the memories linger in your senses long after the event. Today we've had magnificent views, warm sunshine, and hardly anyone else around. The conditions naturally enforced a leisurely pace, and the final kilometre back to Derry Lodge is now being completed in near darkness. Back at the tent, Anna dons her midge hood and starts to prepare our dinner, while I loaf about on the pretext of being on lookout duty for midge sign. I put on my head torch and reveal dark swarm clouds closing in on our position. Experience has instilled us with a flight response, and both of us make for the sanctuary of the Hobbit. The camp stove and our dinner are hastily abandoned as we squeeze our way into the tent. Unhappily, our clothes are now swarming with midges, and these end up inside with us. The Battle of Derry Lodge ensues, and we frantically dispatch the swarming hordes crawling over the inner walls of the tent in a frenzy of remorseless killing. Outside, the goulash is beginning to burn on the unattended stove, and the mother swarm is building around it. It has been a long day, and tempers are now becoming frayed by adversity and the sweaty, cramped confines of the hellish Hobbit. We are both close to the edge of our tolerance, when the realization suddenly dawns that one of us will have to go outside and rescue our dinner. Understandably enough, neither of us is prepared to volunteer for this unwelcome duty straight out. That would be evidence of certifiable madness. It will be an unpleasant ordeal at best, and inevitably it will also admit more of the ravenous vampire beasties to feast on our flesh. After a brief pretence at democratic discussion, Anna, being quicker, smaller, and obviously more agile, is delegated the dual task of retrieving our dinner and making the stove safe for the long night ahead. Anna lives up to my expectations, and she is both speedy and stoic in achieving her twin objectives. Even so, she brings more midges into our inner sanctum, and another killing frenzy ensues. After which we try to eat some of the burnt stew, but our appetites have now faded, and I can also see that the bodies of numerous insect warriors have polluted our tasty meal. I must record that rather than being repulsed by this dietary addition, I take pleasure in it. Extremity of experience often provokes irrational thoughts on my part, and I imagine that the insect hordes lurking just outside the tent will have to fear and respect me if I consume their dead brethren en masse. We expect the night hours to be both long and sleepless. A glance at my watch tells me it's midnight. 6 hours to daylight. 360 minutes. 21,600 seconds. I experience it all in its painful longevity, thinking of the horror of the mid-dawn to come.